Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Corey Rubidoux. I'm CEO of ArchVision. Glad that you all can join us and take time out of your day to be here. We're really excited about this presentation today. Chaos Envision has been somehow part of my life for a few years here. The underlying technology behind Chaos was behind Envision has been around for decades. I should say a decade or so. It started in Chaos's product called Vantage, and Envision is this new product that has come out to the market recently. And we put this presentation together today to really showcase what we see as the benefits of the tool for you all as architects and designers. And when we say that, we mean it as far as like day in and day out, how are you going to use this tool, what it really means, and um, as far as your workflow goes and workflows go and things like that. Uh, I'll make some introductions here. Shylo is going to be a presenter today. Shylo and I go way back. Shylo actually used to work for ArchVision, and she is a designer and an artist. She has 14 plus years of experience in architectural visualization. She's worked in practice. She knows the ins and outs of dealing with different data sets, Revit files and Rhino files, SketchUp files, and so on and so forth, and different rendering engines, from V-Ray to Lumion to Unreal Engine and so on and so forth. So she's been uh, kicking these tools around for quite a while. She's earned her architectural degree from University of Kentucky. She's based in Lexington, and I think you'll see her skills come through in her presentation today, and we hope that this is relatively, let's say, casual. In general, as I said, we've started in the beta version of Envision with the idea behind this particular digital event, working through the ins and outs of beta software crashing and not working and giving feedback to Chaos, and then all the way to rescheduling this webinar or this digital event at the last minute before they released the software so that we could actually get on the latest stable version, because they made a ton of changes and additions and stabilizations to the software literally just before it was released. Without any further ado, I will turn this over to Shylo and let her give us all some insights on Chaos Envision. We will have a Q&A session at the end. Please use the comments or chat, Q&A and chat in the Zoom interface, and we will watch that and get back to you as soon as we can. Shylo, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Corey. Appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen here. So welcome to Chaos Envision and what you need to know to get started quickly and simply. My name is Shylo Silvenar. Just as Corey mentioned, I'm an artist and designer. I've worked in architecture visualization for a really long time, and my degree is in architecture. So what to expect here? The folks I know in architecture often wear multiple hats and need to get things done quickly and simply. They don't have a lot of time to learn a lot of intricate ins and outs, so that's my approach here. I just want to keep it simple and easy for you to get into and get running quickly. I'm also throwing in a few extra tips that I found helpful while working with Envision. Chaos has done an amazing job at making it quick and easy. If you're a power user, though, I will include some links and suggestions to help you dig a little deeper. So today we're going to quickly prep in Revit, export through Enscape, get to know Envision a little bit, and wrap it up with questions at the end, as Corey mentioned. So take notes and let me know if you still have any questions by the end. So like I said before, first we're going to prep our file in Revit and use Enscape to export. We want to check that things are right before exporting, but if we miss something, updating the model in Envision isn't a big deal, so don't fret too much. So here, we're first just going to check out the Revit model, take a look at it. We're going to create a 3D scene specifically for our rendering before exporting and make sure that there isn't anything extra in that view, like this extra topography. Again, you can edit it in Envision later if you want to, but it's just nice to kind of get this step out of the way early. And a quick tip is to pay attention to your links and your additional models in your Revit file. If the positioning isn't too precise, we can import those separately and combine them later in Envision. And you might have a little bit more granular control if you do that. So you could have potentially better results with that. Envision is pretty good at handling large models as well as multiple links, so either way is fine. If something does cause slowdowns, like maybe you just have a really enormous file or a particularly slow computer, just take a minute to hide what you don't see in your rendering view, and that should help out. So here we're going to take a look at our materials. You just want to make sure that your textures are showing up properly. Envision has the Cosmos library, which is full of materials that you can use for general stuff. So you really just want to focus on your custom manufacturer materials and things that are really specific to your project. So this is a nice tip that I found helpful. If you run a rendering in Revit and then uncheck that close dialog box, it'll give you a list of missing textures. And I thought this was helpful. None of those are particularly needed for this project, so I wasn't real worried about them, but it is a nice thing to have in your back pocket when you do need to find out what you're missing. And once the model looks good, you launch it in Enscape. Take a look for anything that, might be a little bit buggy, whatever. You don't have any flying trees or anything like that. And you may want to add some context. This one did not come with a site context, so I am using the site context option in Enscape, which is really nice. I found the location on the map in there and downloaded it. It's a little bit off, so yeah, you might have to adjust it a little bit, and the topography might not match up exactly. So what I did here was I just lowered it down a little bit to have it set in the background, just to give it a little bit of context. Okay. What we're doing here is checking the visual settings. It's worth taking a look at what settings you have in Envision if you use it often enough and have settings that you like. You might want to take note of those just so that you can then take a look at your settings in Envision. They're not going to be apples to apples. They are different types of settings, but there are a few things that you might be able to match up, or it might give you a hint as to, how you've liked your images to look in the past. Things like outlines and the styles in Envision or in Enscape aren't going to translate, so just keep that in mind moving forward. And to export in Enscape, you're going to go up to the V-Ray Scene export icon at the top, select your view, and export. Super easy. It might tell you a little bit about its limitations. Just click on through that. And it's already pre-named, so you're just going to find your project folder and save it there. So now we're going to set up our scene in Envision and get started. So when you open up Envision, you'll see the homepage and options that you expect. For a deeper dive, I suggest visiting the Get Started tab and that link there to go to their online course. We're going to start a new scene. And when you open it up, it's going to highlight all of the UI elements for you. I'm not going to go through this. You're welcome to go through it at another time. You can toggle this on or off anytime. So if you want to bring it back up, I'll show you how to do that. You can go into your preferences. Here you can set up your theme as well as hide or reveal onboarding screens. So importing our file is pretty straightforward. Import, find your file, open, and it's super fast. So you probably could have figured that one out on your own. So if we need to update or replace our link, you want to select the model at the highest hierarchy in the objects panel. And you have a couple of options over on the right. You can replace it by selecting the little folder icon. And all you have to do is click that and find the one that you want to swap in its place, or you can hit the plus sign there and add a new version. And that allows you to swap back and forth between files so that if you need to compare something, you can. It's worth noting that things that you've worked on, so if you've moved stuff around or done any kind of work in your project in Envision, when you update that, it's not going to change anything as long as it still exists in the project that you're importing. So Envision may not import our cameras, and it did not for us. So we're going to have to create one. You can do that over on the left-hand side by clicking the plus icon. And you can rename it by double-clicking here. And it's worth noting that it has its own category in the objects list below. And don't forget to lock your cameras when you get them to the right spot, because it's real easy to not realize you're in your main view. So clicking on the camera opens the contextual view under details. And here you've got all sorts of settings. Under general, we've got our aspect ratios, we've got our focal length. We're setting it to something pretty typical like 35 millimeter. And we've got automatic vertical tilt. I'm checking this because we use 2-point perspective in Enscape. And under the color corrections options, I'm increasing bloom a little bit and locking the camera. You can come back later and further adjust the camera when you're ready. I wanted to highlight the color correction settings because I think they'd easily be overlooked, and that's where a lot of the settings available to you in Envision are located. Now that we've got our camera set up, we can look at our environment settings. So to do that, we're going to go over to the right, and here we have some weather effects that you can turn on or off or adjust. We have the clouds on, wind, haze. We have physically based lighting and HDRI lighting that can be used independently or together. Cosmos has a lot of HDRIs available, or you can load your own. We're going to use the sunlight settings and the location of our building. And unfortunately, the view that I have here is a little bit shady most of the time, but we're rolling with it. Don't forget your time zone and adjust the time so that you can get your shadows right. When we're happy with our settings, we can move over to the left side and create an environment to save those settings. Here you can see the new one that we just created and 3 others that I created previously for our animation later. Envision has a really cool feature called variations or variation. If you open the tab in the left panel, we can create a new variation by hitting that plus sign. You can see here that I already have 2 that I've created. The first one is pretty similar to the general variation that we have selected, and variation 2, I've put the building below the ground so that we can have it growing up out of the ground. There are some things that you cannot do in a variation except for the general variation. You'll notice here that the group nodes can't be grouped in one of the new variations. You have to go to the general variation to group nodes. This is because anything you do in the general variation tab, or yeah, tab, will affect the other variations. And things like grouping have to be done globally in order for it to work properly. So general variation affects everything. Things that would affect everything would need to be done in the general variation tab. Okay, so now we're getting to the fun part. Envision actually allows you to edit the model, not just render and fly through it with a camera. So that's a lot more fun. Let's take a look at editing our scene in Envision. We're looking to make sure we're in the correct variation and the environment and the camera. So we're making a working camera here so that we don't mess up our front view. And our environment is general, the variation is general. And we'll add we're gonna edit our brick material. So we're gonna zoom in, which is why we added that working camera. And we'll use the eyedropper tool to select our material. And now there's all kinds of enhancements we can do, color changes we can make. I've noticed that the bump on this is going out instead of in, so we're just fixing that a little bit on both of these materials. So it's super accessible, super easy. Now we're going to edit some of the geometry. I've selected some of the site behind the building there, and I'm trying to scale it up, and you'll notice that it pops up off the site. That's because the pivot point is off somewhere that we have no idea. So we're going to fix that by undoing the scaling that we just did, and we'll go up to the Edit Pivot Point button. And we're going to move that pivot point to the bottom center of that object. And click Apply. And now when we scale, it will work just like it's supposed to. So I like that the pivot point's really easy to adjust. It's handy for things like animating doors and stuff like that too. So we can totally edit assets we brought in similarly to the geometry we edited a moment ago, with the idea that we're going to be animating the scene. We want to move these guys around to suit an animation since they're not animated. So we'll put them in places where it makes sense for them to hold still. This is really nice because it allows you to use assets that you already have in your scene in a productive way. You don't have to reselect new characters to do that, or new assets to do that. It just increases your variety and just makes selection a little bit easier. So Envision's Cosmos library is super easy to use. You can move, rotate, scale, just like any of your 3D software. The limitation comes to materials. Not all of the assets are going to give you options to edit any of the materials. Some of your other assets that you bring in, however, might allow you to edit the materials on them here. You'll just have to try them out and see. Materials in the Cosmos library can be edited, but you have to embed those in your scene. So here we're adding an asphalt, and then you have to embed it before you can make any changes. I'm gonna make the color just a little bit lighter just for the sake of experimenting and Here, I'm also showing you that you can use the filter to see some of the additional options available in the Cosmos library. They have 40 characters, which are something that we're going to look at here in a little bit when we look at the anima animation. Beyond the assets in the library, Envision also allows you to create geometry and lights. So here we see the shapes that are available. I'm going to create a box. This might be good for adding a contextual mass in the side or maybe even a wall. I think it's nice to just be able to do something quick and easy without having to go all the way back to Revit. We're going to add some lights to these sconces here, some sphere lights. Super easy to drop in and move around. To duplicate, I'm going to hit Control D. Right clicking can also give you that option. And so now they're really going to pop, and you have options for the color of the light and intensity. When we do that animation, the lights that we've added will really help the building stand out. I really love the scatter feature in Envision. I was always a fan of the grass in Enscape because I thought it was really nice that it did that texture for you. But here you just have a lot more control over how it looks. So we're selecting that and picking the geometry that or the pieces that we actually want to show up in it. We're controlling how much of it we want to see. It's really nice. The other option is to use a preset. Here we're dropping a grass lawn preset onto a section of the grass. And that's super plush. There's a lot of grass in that. So we're going to turn that off for a second so that we can show you the preset for trees using a spline. The reason I don't put the spline on the grass is because it tries to attach to all the different blades. We're going to drop that on there. And you can control the type of trees, the size, the spacing. There are a ton of settings that you can go through and play with to make it how you want it to look. And just remember to turn your grass lawn back on. All right, so now we're going to get into animation. It's one of my favorite parts of Envision. The firms I worked with always wanted animations, but the time involved was often cost prohibitive and many projects just didn't have the budget for it. So this doesn't have to be the case anymore. Envision makes it super easy and you can do a lot of things very quickly. So let's start with animating our camera. First, we're going to duplicate the front camera by selecting it and hitting the plus button, and rename it by double clicking on the name. To open the timeline, we're going to use the film reel at the bottom. We'll drag our camera into the timeline and scrub to the end of it. We're going to zoom in a little bit. And it's done. It's that simple. You can also use the look at and move along spline tools for panning, which is really nice. So now we'll look at animating the environment for things like sun studies. I'm going to extend the camera to the end of the timeline and clean up the keyframes. So now it goes the entire timeline. And we've got those 3 environments that we made earlier. I'm going to drop those in, and then it's the linear portion of the linear transition between these that's really important. That's where it's going to animate the sun moving through the sky. So we want to make those pieces that we drop in as small as possible. and we're spreading it out over the timeline. We're just eyeballing it. But if you want to be super precise, you can right click on those pieces and type in the time. So animating variations can be a little bit tricky. Once you get used to it, it's really handy. So in the version tab, you can see the two variations that I created for this, and you can see that the trees that we just created are above the ground when the rest of it's below the ground. So we're going to fix that by creating a group, and I've sped this up a little bit. We created a group of things that need to move below ground that aren't a part of the original model. So I've done that and called it move with building. And we're going to go below ground. And we don't have to be too precise with it down here because you're not going to see it, but you want to get it pretty close so that the timing matches when they come up above. So we're dragging those variations into the timeline, and we're going to leave the hold parts a little bit on the bookends just so that there's a time for it to be underground and see it there, and then the transition, and then a time for it to be above ground. And you can play with this and do whatever you would like for it, but just to be quick about it, we're making it super simple. So here's the result of that, just to do a draft for you. And this is a draft rendering. It is not a high quality rendering. And I think it gets a little bit better with the higher quality to fill in the light because that was kind of dark. So we're going to animate in two ways here. First, we're going to work with variations, much like we did a moment ago. We're going to use this car over here as an example. We're in the general variation right now, and we're moving the car to the beginning of where we want it to move from. And then we're going to duplicate variation 1 because it's the latest in the timeline. And we're going to move that car forward to where we want it to be. And hit OK. And now drag that into the timeline. And the part that you want to pay attention to here is that linear portion, because that is how long it takes for it to get to where it's going. So if you want the car to move faster, you want that linear portion to be shorter. The other way of animating is with splines. We're going to use this car for this portion of it. And I'm going to create a spline here. You start where you want the car to start from, and the second end of it's going to be where you want the car to go. And hit done. And you'll notice that it's invisible right now. That I think is a little bit of a bug, but it could be user error. I'm not going to say that I know for sure that it's a bug, but it did it to me a few times. It's just got to turn it back on, and we're attaching that, rotating it negative 90 degrees, and then adjusting the speed. Now both of those are animated. It's real easy. You will notice again that this is above the ground, so we're going to fix that. We can't move it there, so we're going to have to go to the general variation and then move it into move with building. And that way it'll actually start at the beginning with it. Okay. Now we're going to animate with the Anima crowd simulation, which is really easy. You just click on the Anima button there at the top. Make sure that you're in the general variation and environment and in your working camera so that you can zoom in. We're going to zoom in and make sure we're kind of getting in the middle of the sidewalk. Click done when you get that in there. We're gonna increase our actor count a little bit so that we have more people. I want to be able to notice them and hit generate. And it's gonna select all kinds of people that are gonna now walk on that spline. And again, they're above ground. So we're gonna do the same thing we did before and drag them into our group for move with building. And now they sprout up just like everything else. All right, now we're finally at rendering. First, we're going to render a still image. To do that, we're going to set up our variation to general, environment to general, and use our front view and go to render still image. You've got some different options for the camera types, your resolution settings, your render quality, etc. You have 13 channels for post-processing to pick from. I'm picking all of them just so I can show you what those look like when they come out. Name it here, tell it where you want it to go, what type of file you want it to be, and hit start. I'm not going to make you wait for that, so that's your result there. These are your channels. So now we're going to render the animation. Again, go to render, render images, and click on sequence. You've got similar settings, similar cameras available. I'm keeping mostly the same settings here. Naming it. I like really long names, apparently. So those are the file formats you have available, and then click start. And that's the result. So again, you have our final results here. Could it use some tweaking? Absolutely. But we just wanted to make this really quick so you guys can kind of get an idea of what it's capable of. So we covered starting out in Revit, exporting to VR Scene via Enscape, imported VR Scene into Envision, set up our cameras, variations and environments, adjusted materials and assets, animated the scene, and rendered out a high quality view and animation, all in a relatively short amount of time, given there was some speeding up there, but that was still pretty quick. Some of my favorite parts were the things like it's pretty simple to get started. It's pretty intuitive. The animation is really versatile once you get used to it. You just got to kind of wrap your head around it. The versions are really nice for quick changes. I know that when I worked in architecture visualization for firms, they would often like to see multiple varieties of options, and versions can do that for you. It imports from various softwares. So I know that there were a lot of times when I had site coming from SketchUp, I had interiors coming from CAD, and then my Revit files when I was working with renderings, and it's always kind of difficult to get all of those to play well together, but Envision does a really good job with that. And then the Chaos library is just really nice. It has a lot of stuff in it that's really well made, and it also works well with other libraries, such as anything that you bring in from Revit, or if you want to import individual assets, you can do that as well. So it's pretty versatile. Some things that I would like to see. I would really like my cameras to import from Revit. Um, I'm not sure that they know that it's not doing that, so that might just be something that'll get solved pretty soon. The camera settings from Enscape, I would like those to match my Envision settings as much as possible. I know that they're not apples to apples, but it'd be really nice if those could match up a little bit better. I'd like to be able to make adjustments to variations and environment segments in the timeline. Right now, you have to delete them out of the timeline to make adjustments and then drag them back in and re-stretch them. I would like to not have to do that. And then I would like them to correct the invisible spline issue. If it's not my error, I'm still going to test that out and make sure it's not some sort of thing that I did in the process of making this project that caused that to happen. But so far, I haven't found anything that caused that. So some tips I find helpful. Export from the angle you want your camera to be. And sometimes when you open your Envision project, it will be from that angle so that you can save it right away. I've had that happen and I've had it not happen. For this one, it did not happen, and I had to find that angle and resave it. So that's one of those camera things that I think they need to fix. Camera template for settings or duplicate previous cameras. So this is like if you have settings that you apply to a camera, you get it to match as close as your Envision settings as you can get it. You can create a template of that, and I didn't go over that because it's kind of detailed, but you can create a template for that to duplicate and put onto other cameras so that you don't have to redo all of those. When adding splines for trees after adding scatter grass, the spline tool wants to attach to every individual blade of grass. So hide your grass first or add your trees first. Um, I think that you'd probably be able to figure that out, but it took me a sec. If your frame rate slows, you can adjust the quality for your preview in the upper right corner. For us, it wouldn't have helped much because we were using variations to move the whole model. But it is possible to reduce the quality so that you can get some better um, previews going on there. And to swap between walking and flying mode, you have to use the full screen mode, which we didn't really use much. You can get into that by hitting F11 or using this button that I show here at the top right of the viewport panel, and then use the buttons in the center of the screen to toggle between regular cameras, walking, or flying. And that's it. Thank you for having me. And thank you for sitting with me through this. And I'm happy to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you, Shiloh. Couple questions coming in. Do you, so there's a question here. Can you be using Revit features like design options, phases, and etc. to export out separate views to Envision? Not sure if you know the answer to that. We didn't dive too deep.
Um,
Design
I
options
think
component.
I think you can use design option. I'm going to say I don't know for certain, but I believe you can. So if you're in Revit and you're wanting to use design options to export, just make sure that whatever is in the view that you're exporting is what you want to see in your Envision walkthrough or your Envision rendering. Um, I think what it's doing is taking the geometry that it sees and then putting that into a file. So I don't think it matters that it's an option. I don't think that's going to change a whole lot. It's just that's all it's going to export when it exports into Envision.
But those options aren't stored in the variations
No,
context at all, right? So
you'd have to
that's
export them separately and then create variations with those. So you can export them separately and import them separately and then create a variation with each of those if you wanted to do that.
yeah. Do you know off the top of your head what file formats are importable into InVision currently?
Um, I had that list. Actually, don't know off the top. I think it's FBX, DAE, VR, Scene, and OBJ. I think there's one more.
I think it's a VR Mesh, I think is the other one that,
Yeah, I think that's right.
yeah.
I think that's it.
Um, I think one of the things that's pretty interesting is the fact that you can have, um, you know, Enscape running in Revit, same project, parts of it might be in SketchUp and you're rendering with Enscape, and the fact that you can export out an Enscape file from Revit and an Enscape file from SketchUp and an Enscape file from Rhino, if you were that, if you had multiple applications like that going on your project, you can aggregate all three of those
Hmm.
Enscape files into the same Envision scene, right?
Yep.
Um, uh, I will point out some one. If I remember this correctly, I have to remember the actual number. I think it's 50,000 unique objects that are you have a limitation on when importing your model into Envision. So we had some sample file or some customer files that we were working on to try to bring those into Envision and just stress test the application. And we found that the import was failing into Envision because there were just so many unique objects in the Revit file. And there's a 50,000 unique object limit inside of Envision. So we had to end up basically turning off a bunch of the interior parts of the Revit file so that we could get the um, the project into Envision to be able to do. We didn't run into that with this particular project, but we
Yeah,
did.
this one was right around 5,000
Yeah, it's not too bad.
objects. Yeah.
Um, let's see if there are any other questions here. Uh, where are we? Uh, don't have any other questions in the chat at the moment. Um, yeah, look, we're going to do this again. If y'all have any questions for us, please feel free to email us at sales@archvision.com. We're going to keep digging into this and try to keep uh, hands on with the product's evolution and try to um, really stay in touch and tune and keep you all informed. Please, let us know if you have any questions, and we'll be glad to help you all out. Thanks for joining us all today. Again, thanks for taking time out of your day to come and visit with us and watch Shiloh's great work that she's put together here. And we thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Bye for now.